Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for joining the community meeting today. Like every time, we start by welcoming new folks, and we have someone new today. Andrea, would you like to say a quick hi and give a quick intro of yourself and what brings you to the Crow community meeting?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Andrea. I'm based out of Munich, Germany. I work for Celonis, and we are kind of evaluating Crow. We find it very useful for our environment and would like to get more involved into discussion about some features. That's why I'm here today.
Sweet. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. In the agenda, we you can like put any specific items you'd like to talk about. There's a section for open discussions. Yeah, just like feel free to add things in there. Um, we can start by doing the milestone review. So today is a special week for Crow because we don't make releases very often, but last week we made the 0.4. Um, I think half of the features made it, which is great. It's not a bad number, could have been worse. But yeah, we merged like a bunch of bug fixes and features. I'll share my screen. Are you able to see my screen? Yeah, I'll talk real quick about 0.4 and what's going on. I mean, my personal like favorite features is the optionals. So Crow now support optionals um in the cell expressions. And what does that mean is probably we have an example somewhere here. Oh,
Yeah, I
this is
think
a
we have
good
a
one.
PR. I think we even have a PR open for the doc to get updated.
Oh, even better. Even better. Let me check a look at that.
This one. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
I think this one is really easy to understand because I'm just using a functionality that already exists in Kubernetes, and I just modeled it with Crow. So what you can see here is you have a config map, right? And a config map is schemaless. And before, Crow would always throw errors if we were trying to reference fields from schemaless resources, and now no longer the case, which is amazing. So big shout out also to Fabian, who worked with me on this. I think the one thing that always came up as a follow-up question from everyone we showed this to was, when can we put our own schemas on top of resources that don't already have schemas? But I think that's a discussion for another day, I guess.
What do you
Because
mean by
there are like, if you have like a generic schemaless resource, right? It can also be an unstructured or like an embedded resource, right? With allow unknown fields. Now you can access these fields, but now what people want is they want to get the schema back. So they want to know, like they want to build their own schema on top of it to get type safety back. I don't know what I think about it, to be honest. I just got the question like 2 or 3 times. Like for me, I'm just happy that I can finally reference config maps and secrets safely, right? As much as you are probably, but I just wanted to bring it in here that I got the question a few times already. And even in the PRs, we had these questions a few times.
yeah, I think that's a very interesting one. I don't know. I think it definitely is possible if someone can provide a schema to, like wrap the schemaless CRD or fields. But but yeah, it's an interesting use case for sure. I want to show something real quick and just explain this example. Let me see if I can do an edit. This is cool. All right, sweet. So basically, what's going on in here is this interrogation mark. Basically, this is something new in Crow, and it's existed in Cell for a long time. What it means is like, hey, only if this field exists, evaluate it. So say like if equal value did not exist in the config map, it's Crow is not gonna error and start like screaming. Um, and basically what we used to do before in Cell, I mean, there was a workaround for this. I don't know if I if we have documentation on this. But the workaround was, like, you would do something like, hey, if inputs that data has equal value, and then you enter in a ternary and be like, hey, you know what? I want you to evaluate this, which is like a bit of a hassle to do all this stuff. If not, you do null. This was like this, I think, the expanded version of this just interrogation marking here, which is really cool. So now we have to write way less. We don't have to think about ternaries. This is awesome. So I still haven't used it yet, but I'm really, really excited about this. This is really cool. So yeah, again, thank you, Jacob and Fabian. This is really awesome. The other one that I'm really excited about too is we have new defaulting mechanisms in Crow. And let me explain actually what I mean by that. It's not defaulting mechanism in itself, but yeah, this one. Basically what this one means is that if you create an RGD like this, and you have this enabled nested field in ingress that has a default false, in Crow you had to provide actually an empty ingress in order to get the enabled field defaulted. There was like no way for Crow to understand that it needs to default the ingress first to an empty struct, and then default the enable field. And yeah, for like as of today, this is not needed. If you give an empty spec, Crow will naturally default the ingress and default the enabled field. I don't know, Andrea, is this you by any chance?
Yeah, that's me. Yes.
Oh my God. Okay. I genuinely like randomly just like talks about this PR. I didn't know it was you. I'm just like linking the dots now.
All good.
So yeah, this is really cool. I think generally it sounds correct for Chrome. I know like in other controllers, this behavior might be not wanted. But in Crow at least, it feels like natural, and we definitely like should try to keep this one. And yeah, I mean, there's like a bunch of other features. The release note is there. There's also something super interesting that's happening is that we are changing all the status conditions. And thank you so much, Scott, for like revamping our conditions and making them more Kubernetes friendly and nicer. So this is like a breaking change, but I think it should be fine since the status conditions are managed by Crow itself. So unless if you're using Argo CD and have some Lua scripts around the conditions, you're not really impacted by this change. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Any questions about 0.4 before I talk about 0.5? Cool. Let's talk about 0.5. So I think not a lot of them, but the major changes we wanted to make in 0.5, 0.4 didn't make it, and mainly because it's big changes and we need more reviewers and more thoughts around them. The one that I'm really like interested into lately is the apply set feature. So we're moving a lot of not moving, we're changing how Crow works. Generally, like the child resources management system is changing slightly. Before, we used to do a get, do a compare, and then decide whether we make an update or not. And what that meant is that if you ever had a mutating webhook or a defaulting webhook, or things that change from their desired state, it was like very, very hard to track what's going on. One very known bug is not bug, but very weird behaviors with secrets. When you define a secret with a string data, the the Kubernetes API server will base64 encode it and remove the string data and put it in a field called data, and that confuses Crow in understanding what is the difference between the desired and the latest state. So this is like really cool is going on in here. I just dropped a comment this morning. I don't know if Barney is around. No, I don't see Barney.
Yeah, just joined.
Oh, cool. So yeah, I just dropped a comment this morning. Overall, the implementation looks good. I just like had a few comments about the apply set library and yeah, and mainly just like a few small mechanics inside of it. But yeah,
Okay.
please, like, Barney, take a look and let me know what you think later.
Yeah. I know Scott's and your comments are pending. I'll take a look at them today.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I think I can like skim through it real quick. The other main thing that is happening is Scott is continuing to work on conditions, and this time he's gonna break the instance conditions. Fix them. So that's like hopefully the last the last time we're gonna like do something like aggressive with conditions. But I think it's much needed, and it's definitely for a good long-term investment for us. So yeah, this is something that is coming in 0.5. The other one is the
We might want to just say that the only thing that you really should depend on is ready, because the implementation might change what subconditions we use.
yes. I want to like link Scott's proposal in here. So Scott wrote a markdown or even a Google Doc at some point. Let me share it on the chat. So this is actually the proposal about what the status conditions will look like. So yeah, just like in a nutshell, we're gonna have to depend on there's one main condition is called like ready, and this is a pattern that we're seeing more and more in Kubernetes. So it's good just like to standardize and have things look very, very similarly. So yeah, I'll talk about two more things that are happening in 0.5 and then leave it up for questions for folks. The first one is collections. So we're bringing collections into Chrome, very similar to, let me see, do I have a PR linked here? No. Let me just show an example real quick. So very similarly to Terraforms for each, we're bringing a similar concept to Crow. So now you could actually create a collection of objects instead of just one object. So say you want to like create the replica set concept. So it's a collection of pods. You could do a for each loop over a few things, could be arrays, maps, anything enumerable, and you could replicate those resources. Anyways, there is a draft PR from this. If anyone want to like take a look at that and start bringing feedback, that would be appreciated. The other one, or other like last two things I wanted to talk about is the Crow CLI and the LSP, like so language service protocol, language server protocol for Crow are getting developed. So if you go to the Crow directory, actually we have a CLI already in here. So if you want to start playing with it and seeing how it works, it's not documented yet, but it's not also like very complex to navigate. It's very simple CLI that like validates your RGD. It can generate also like your CRD if you want to see it earlier. It can also generate diagrams, which is very cool. Like if you want to see your RGD as a graph, you can see something like this. So you can like see who depends on what. If you have like very complex RGDs and they are like interconnected, it's something that you can you can take a look at right now. The next thing we're bringing for the CLI is the storing RGDs in OCI registry. So you can put an RGD, package it, store it in ECR or Docker Hub or whatever, and you can distribute it using the CLI as well. So I think Daria has already like a PR on this one that needs a review as well. Yeah, with that, I will stop in here. I don't want to make this a monologue. Let me know if you have any questions or anything specific, like a specific question about any of those features or 0.5 in general.
I think I wanted to ask regarding the status rework. I just posted a message. I was wondering because I think there's like a very old cap on standardizing conditions as well. Are we using this as baseline for the conditions rework, or is this kind of like our own take on Kubernetes conditions?
I don't know if Scott is hearing
Because
us.
I remember that I don't know who it was, forgive me, who said that the only API you should depend on is the ready condition. But I think as per Kubernetes APIs, usually every condition is public API. That's why it's typed as machine readable. I mean, I would agree with you. Ideally, we only tell people to watch for ready condition. I just know, like, from practice, that's rarely, what people do if the entire API is public.
I think if you understand the implementation, then you can depend on a subcondition, but what you're really doing is tying yourself to an actual controller implementation. And so if you're talking core types, then yeah, you're tying yourself to core Kubernetes. But if you're tying yourself to like a CRO RGD that you don't understand what it's going to do, or I replace the controller with something else, it's not a stable API. But it is a stable API for the implementation that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair to say ready is a stable API, whereas the other subconditions not be stable until we hit 1.0?
In the weird Scott religion, ready and succeeded are the only stable APIs that you can depend on.
I mean, fair enough. Why not? If we can say that as such, that we say, okay, ready is the go-to that we want to always keep, why not? Right.
And that mirrors what happens in this dissented, the inverse true library, the K status. Its backup is look for ready or succeeded, and its default is look for anything that's true sad, which is really stupid because you don't understand observed generation if the thing disappears.
I mean, I know it's a little off topic, but I'm going to plus one on a lot of what Scott's saying. I saw a recent article or document where someone had done an analysis of status across all the Kubernetes objects, and even things like true should mean healthy and false should mean not is not, or the inverse. Neither one of them is actually a standard, right? Like I mean, it gets into one of my real religions, which is we shouldn't use Booleans, but we should use enumerations. But yeah, I would say like you really need to, if you're going to use anything, you need to really understand what it is. And it's not clear that that's true in most cases.
Yeah. So in Knative, we had to add an additional field inside of conditions to understand if it's a condition that relates to the top level condition or if it's just informative. For example, in Knative, the thing can scale to 0, and well, you want something that says if it's scaled up or not, of course, right? So there's a subcondition, but that can be true or false, but it doesn't mean that the service isn't ready. And so that subcondition is an FYI internal thing. So it gets complicated. We also created priorities so that if 4 things are unknown, we surface the biggest priority one, but core Kubernetes doesn't have these concepts.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean, there are other people who've tried other ways to. I mean, it's one of those, everyone wants to put in a new standard to solve the problem if there are too many standards around this.
Yeah. And the last soapbox topic is that people tend to point back to core Kubernetes as like, this is the way the gods did it. And if you talk to API machinery people, they wouldn't do it this way. It's just locked in as the API. So it's challenging to change. It's probably not the best practice. Like, for example, core Kubernetes deletes conditions out of the status to make it easier to understand what the state of the resource is. But this is actually really bad because you don't actually understand what the reconciler did for that resource. It's built for the human, right? Like the case status stuff is built for humans looking at resources rather than machinery looking at the resources, understanding when to do work. Yeah.
Just on that, Scott, like I'm very interested to hear. KSS is actually not built for humans. It is built for. It was intended. Well, it's intended for aggregation of those conditions up into a parent object. We built it, I think, primarily for config sync, which is our GitOps thing. Like, so that's the sort of case. But I think if there are bugs there, yeah, we'd love to figure out. Let's do better, right? But
yeah, the biggest bug is losing observed generation and not having a stable ready condition.
When you say losing observed generation, do you mean that each individual condition should have observed generation on it?
Correct. With managed fields, that's the only way to make that sensible. There's like an additional contract that no one's really talked about because managed fields don't get used a ton. But if you have two controllers reconciling status on an object, the partnership should be that one of those controllers is the dominant one that gets to own ready, and they recalculate ready based on all known subconditions. And there's like no way to really opt in subconditions to relate back to ready, but you could split the responsibility, and then each controller could then propagate their observed generation to their subcondition, and then only when all of your subconditions for all of the collection of controllers that reconcile this object have observed the generation, then you can mark that as ready and true. It's complicated.
Yeah, I have in the past basically advised people not to have multiple controllers, like if they can possibly avoid it, like because it is not. Well, there's so many ways to mess up, right?
Lava Lamp went on vacation, and then we got managed fields, and so now we can have multi-controllers.
Okay.
I mean, anyway, I was just asking if we were according to the CAP, and this kind of went off rails a bit. I think the answer is yes, we are, and we are using a standard condition format that is well accepted in the community. So I think for me, LGTM, I guess, right? So at least conceptually, no issues here, I think.
Yeah, I think many controllers are using these patterns. They are not like specific to Crow. At least I know Carpenter and is it Tekton? Knative for sure. But I think Carpenter and Tekton are using those.
Carpenter, Tekton, Knative, Kata.
And also, I think in ACK we use similar patterns, except that we don't have the ready condition. We have a different name for it, but we use a similar pattern as well. There's this top level condition that tells you or gives you like the main information that you need to look for as a human engineer. Anyways, looking forward to seeing that in the instances too. I think it's going to be very useful, and hopefully we'll never have to change that. I'm confident actually it should be like the last time we'll touch conditions. Famous last words. Matt, that's a good point.
Yeah, I know Scott said that. I guess what I'm saying is like, should we actually put it in our docs someplace? Like, I know we're saying it here, but like, should we write it down someplace?
Oh, no, no. My
Um,
statement was we should document that. That was
okay, okay.
that's what I said. I mean, if people understand the implementation of Crow, then they can depend on a subcondition, but it might be interesting to define your API, and maybe Crow does it, but maybe I take that API and implement my own controller.
Um, I like the idea of not recommending they don't depend on anything other than ready. Are we ready? Are we at this point where we are happy to have them take a dependency on ready, or would we say, yeah? So we want to be careful how we word that, right?
On RGDs, yes. On the instances, no.
Yeah, I mean, given that we don't say anything today, maybe it's okay to just wait, Scott, until you've done the like on instances, and then we can just write generic, like in the website, as a concept or whatever, talk about conditions and like what you should or shouldn't do with them, or put them as a subheading in one of the existing concept articles that we've got.
Yeah. So in one of the interesting visualizations that you can do inside of Knative is that like a serving service has a couple subconditions, and each one of those relate to children that it produces. And so you can actually build a graph of ready to subcondition to ready of child to its subconditions to ready of deployments. And it's a very interesting, powerful visualization to show that. So I'm hoping we can do something similar with Crow, but give me some time. I'm also helping support like the Crossplane 2.0 launch right now, so I'm a little busy.
That's awesome. And yeah, like I think the idea that we had in case status was you want the ready condition to serve as a flag, like a aggregate thing. And if you want to drill down into the details, rather than reflect it up, like go down and look at like the child objects, right? And like then you can still build the graph, but you don't have to surface each thing and have multiple controllers fighting. And when we made that mistake, it is painful. So yeah, if we can do it that way, that would be my preference. But you know.
Can I switch topics?
Please.
So Barney has a PR that basically allows you to point to a named secret, and then be able to reference an object off cluster and pull its data. And Amin and I were talking about like what would it look like for that to be a generic feature. And at LinkedIn, there's a public post about how I helped. We implemented something called a mirror controller, and the idea was that it's really difficult to move groups for a resource. Like if you wanted to move the API group because you missed the name or you want to align internally, it's really difficult. So I had this idea. I was like, well, we could just move it to another thing, and we could have a controller that you could mark something as mirrored, and it would project the old thing into the new thing. And so like status comes from the new one projected to the old one, and state goes from the old one into the new one, and everyone's happy. The same idea could apply to Crow if we wanted to keep the controller simple and mirror cross-cluster objects from one place to the next, or from local to a remote cluster, and not have the instance controller have to do that logic, but have these shell objects that are kind of like symlinks to other clusters. And the symlink could say, I'm either this cluster is controlling this spec and status, and I just want to push the data over there so the signal shows up. Or the other way is maybe, I think what Barney's PR is trying to do, where there's a remote object and I want to bring the signals from the remote place here, except you don't really get that without active watches and things like that. So I think I'm working on a design doc to kind of illustrate some of these concepts, and rather than hit the simple one of like, I want to be able to pull config from this remote place here. What I actually want to do is bring the signals from the remote cluster to the local cluster so that the RGD instance controller can act on changes to the children or the, I don't know, what do you call a child that you don't control? The cousin? I
The
don't know.
grandchild.
Yeah, so like an informed resource, right? Like it's a dash dash pointer to something over there. I want to influence my RGD instance spec or status or whatever, but it doesn't live here. And then there was and then okay, sorry, last thing, and I'll open it up. There was this other interesting question of how could I make Crow instances namespaced in Slack? And it occurred to me that if we solve this problem of remote cluster mirror stuff, someone could very cleverly, like, potentially use like KCP and Crow to push your control plane into like an inner control plane and then project the results out potentially, right? So I think there's a lot of concepts here. And is anyone else interested in these things? Anyone know prior art? I was going to take a look at the landscape. I know there's like a new project to do controller runtime multi-cluster that we could look and learn from, maybe leverage. I'm going to mute.
Yeah, I think it's at least it's definitely the time to start thinking about that problem. I know, like in the beginning, we've been a little bit resistant in the early days of Chrome, like, hey, it's too early to think about multi-cluster orchestration. But like now, I think it's a good time to start at least like brainstorming ideas and what can we do to have Chrome manage resources in multiple clusters. There are different approaches for sure. I'm super happy to see a proposal on this.
Yeah, I think it's going to
This,
take a design doc, yeah, for sure. But I think what I'm kind of getting towards is maybe it's a separate controller or kind of resource or something like maybe it's in Knative, I made an experiment called the sugar controller where you annotate something and that annotation does some other magic thing. And so I did a KubeCon talk where I made a duck type of something and then I added the sugar controller and it spins off a reconciler for every duck type in the cluster and you can add sugar. So the sugar was like make a trigger or something.
mhm.
And so anything that's addressable, meaning I can derive a URL based on status, I can mark that in the CRD. Now I have a registry of kinds that adhere to a certain duck type, and I can make a controller that operates on those duck types, and I sugar the experience by annotating it, doing something magic. I think we could do this similar something with Crow, where, you know, it's really easy if they're all Crow objects because has anyone ever used the pattern of the this is dedicated to an implementation of a controller? So like this thing is classed as A or B. Sometimes we do this to enable like upgrading a specific controller implementation where you say like if it doesn't have this annotation, then it's the default one. If it does have this one, then you better be the the release 572 or else don't touch this resource. We could do something similar where it's like this thing is mirrored into that remote cluster. You better not reconcile it. This other thing's going to help you project it over there and do the synchronization. Um, what that lets us do is can remain consistent in the instance controller, and we're still operating on normal watches in cluster resources, uh, and we get those edges from changes in remote objects.
I just want to add that when we did the reconciliation checks now in the watch set on Barney's PR and also in the research that I've been doing, it's a pain in the ass to work with the execution client and with the service account differentiation. And I really think that if you want to work on something that works with remote cluster, we first have to check how we, in general, handle different service accounts, different permission sets in Crow in a way that is manageable and that can scale before we consider like scaling out the system to actually work with many clusters, right? Like we have to have a solid permission model first before we start, introducing concepts for interacting with remote clusters, in my opinion. Just because I've seen how much mess it is right now to work with the instance controller, with the service account management and the execution client. And I would like to solve that problem first. But apart from that, fully fine, right? Like with having a design doc on that. But in general, I think we should figure out how the execution client should behave and how we do service account management and Crow.
Scott, I have a hand up. Do you want to go? Do you want to reply to that? Okay. I was gonna. I mean, I like the. Agree. I like the direction. I do think you were sort of suggesting this, Scott, but I do think that we can break down the problem, and that's sort of how we've been approaching it. In like we're trying to fix this in KCC, the controllers for GCP type thing that Google produces. We're starting with leader election. Multi-cluster leader election. So how do you like make sure that only one controller is active? I think then there's a question of how data gets across. For the spec, we are thinking that everyone uses GitOps or some other controlling system. Like the number of people that run multiple clusters and kubectl apply manually to them is probably very small. So probably we don't necessarily need to replicate the spec, but the status we might want to replicate if we want to not, if unless the controller can sort of figure it out, which probably in our case would be expensive because it would be involved going to GCP for each thing. So it might be better to replicate the status, but we think of those as like different pieces, right? Like those are 3 decisions, and there's a requirement then that we have a way to, if we have leader election, there's a requirement that we have a way to have our controllers back off, as it were, like an annotation that says, don't touch this one, or like, and so we're working on that, and hopefully we'll have something in open source soon. And yeah, we'd love to collaborate on all of this stuff and figure out what the right breakdown of this functionality is.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a +1 to having a design we can talk through. Yeah, that's great. In response to the controller question, Amin and I were also talking about we haven't really talked about partition. Well, Barney had a PR to try to do work queue partitioning. And I had the thought of like, what if we actually made a resource that was an internal Crow controller resource that by default, everything like kind of gets piled onto the same partition. But let's say you had a really hot instance type. You could make a controller that says like, I am going to produce another deployment that is the controller code that owns this one work queue space. Is that an interesting direction? Maybe someone else wants to help document or design doc that with me. So basically what it would mean is kind of by default, everything ends up in the same deployment, and that thing owns the entire queue space. But if you wanted to, you could make another instance of a controller, and it says like, you own this swath of space, of key space, or this kind, or this partial space of the kind. Maybe those are only relate to the remote cluster, and then you attach a security key onto that. Maybe that solves our problem of who owns what, where, and when.
I'd be interested in designing that with you, Scott. I don't know. It sounded like someone else was saying something there. So maybe was it Barney? I don't know, but there might be other volunteers. But yeah, like I do think that is a generally applicable thing, at least in concept, right? And there will be some questions about like how we correctly avoid, how we let users like, do they use label selectors, and then what happens when they the label selectors overlap, and all the normal jazz. Right. But yes, it'll be fun. And I think it comes up a lot. And, we have a particular solution in KCC, which is specific to namespaces. And it is valuable, but like the fact that it is specific to namespaces is also suboptimal for many people who are like, well, most of my namespaces are not very hot, so most of them can actually share, but this one should not, type thing.
We have a solution in Knative where we have two things. We have a priority queue and a slow lane in queuing thing, so that watches go in the slow lane and human interactions go in the fast lane. But we can also partition the entire key space and make an arbitrarily large controller set. So we have HA, but there's like 8 controllers running, and they have 1/8 of the key space, and there's no idle HA pod sitting around. So like, well, what would that look like as modeled in a resource as like an internal object to help? Was the thinking there? So, 2 design docs that I would like to have time to write, and I will get there, I swear. So if I think the concern around the current changes with the watch and other things, we might need to think about like naming the cluster, like not only like name and namespace and ID of the object we're reconciling, but like where it came from, which is another concern of like passing in the secret and grabbing config. If you're going to try to watch that thing, it needs to be named because it's remote, right? Like it has a remote identity, a triple rather than a tuple. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like multi-cluster is definitely related to so many other dimensions we're working on today. I think pruning is one of them, watches, garbage collection. Probably the main one that I still don't think there is a good solution for is the type checking system in Crow. I wrote a small comment in the chat, but Crow does a lot of type checking and an intensive drawing behind the scenes to make sure that your RGD makes sense. Now, if you're doing multi-cluster, you need to talk to those clusters before you even start like reconciling the instances, which means that your clusters are statically defined, which which is fine. I think it's okay, but another argument, well, we might also want to support dynamically discovered clusters. Maybe based on annotations and specs in the instance, you talk to different clusters.
Okay.
So definitely it's something that deserves a design doc and a lot of thinking.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that's
Barney.
correct. Yeah, sorry, that's correct. Yeah, it's not just a static list of clusters. You have to look at placement policies, discovery. Yeah, it brings up a lot of other aspects of it. I wasn't too sure if Crow is the place to solve it or if some other projects are solving it. Like a basic thing as identity of a cluster. There's no way in Kubernetes you can know what your cluster name is today. Different, as much as I'm aware of, there's nothing in the standard Kubernetes that allows us to discover its name. So different tools use different configurations that are injected in a cluster.
I had a random thought
So,
when I was walking home. What if we use the UID of like a namespace that's always there, like kube system or something? It's unique and it's always there, and the cluster is super sad if it goes away.
Sounds reasonable.
Hey folks, sorry for like shifting gears a little bit. I just realized that actually we have open discussion points in the agenda, and we have 12 minutes left. So should we like shift gears to that real quick, and maybe like on Slack we can continue talking on the multi-cluster topic? Sweet.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this first one is quite quick. I think we talked about it in past community calls as well, that we want to have like a known issues section, I think, somewhere. We never really got around to it, how that should look like. So the question is how we should tackle that, if at all. So I was wondering if we want some section in the docs for that, if we want some section in the GitHub docs or the website docs, right? Like how that should be filled and how that should be maintained according to releases. So I was looking for some input on that. Especially the thing for the status, for example, now for the breaking changes, those are things we can also talk about in the release, right? So I'm not talking about these changes, but for example, the fact that if you have a CRD right now, it's very hard for Crow to manage changing API versions in group kinds, right? Those are things that I think we should let users know.
Yes. I like the idea. I think we need a GitHub issue on that for sure. And I can see like a known limitations section on the website. Like, hey, here are the things that we're aware of that Crow does not do. And we might be like working on sometime soon. Maybe we can even link the specific GitHub issues for each limitation. Yes.
Should I just start with creating an issue for that first, and then we can aggregate things we have ideas for in there?
Yes, please. Like if you can do that, that would be awesome. And also like we can discuss there and see where do we put that section in the website.
Sounds good. Yeah. And then the next thing is also similar, offering support and PR reviews. Yeah, I've noticed that we have tons of PRs in there and tons of reviews, I think, get stale a lot of times. So I was wondering if you have anything in mind how someone who's not a maintainer can just support in the PR review process with like preemptive reviews so that it's a bit easier for the maintainers to take a look.
Honestly, like the way I'm seeing is that anyone could go and just review PRs as they wish. There is no limitation on who can review PRs. Anyone is welcome to do like a formal code review and like even to the code and the implementation details, not only about the functionality. So that's super welcome in here. And I think as you mentioned, if you want to ask questions about a specific PR in the Slack channel, that's also like an option. Would definitely like welcome that. And if anything, we need it. So.
All right.
Small scope PRs, design doc if you have it, right? Like that helps get stuff quick.
Yeah, I was more looking towards the open list of PRs, but I think what Armin said is totally on point for this one, right? So I think just going through them one by one and then, yeah, I mean, offering first reviews, I think can already help. Yeah, works for me. And then the watch said, oh my God. Yeah, sorry, go ahead. My bad.
I was going to say, I do know that we also, at least last time we went and looked through some of the old PRs, like I know we did some squash shenanigans in Maine a while ago, which required folks to rebase. And so there's a bunch of old PRs that like we've either asked or maybe have not even asked for them to rebase, and they may not have done so. And so I think those PRs in particular are in a bit of an awkward state where like they're not really reviewable right now because they look like ridiculous in terms of how many changes they have. But that's not actually what's in the PR, and we sort of need the PR author to come like back around and fix it up in order for it to get to a point. So I mean, maybe at some point we need to decide to just like close those if basically give the author an opportunity to like rebase them, and then if they haven't done that in a couple weeks, like we go close it and say, hey, just please reopen or something like that, because that may help us clean things up some too. I don't know if other folks have thoughts on that topic.
Yeah, definitely. I like the name Squash and Shenanigans. That's definitely exactly what we've done. Yeah, I think we need help with those, and also like the people who have push access, they can also like rebase and push those PRs. I don't think it's very complicated, but it actually could have also conflicts.
You can't push on a remote fork.
As a maintainer, you can.
It's a GitHub setting. Yeah,
yeah.
He's right.
But can you force push? I'm not sure
Force
if you can
push on a
force
fork?
push.
Yeah,
I think so.
I don't think so. I think you can edit the PR.
No, you can actively push to the branch.
What?
Yeah.
Even if it's on a remote. I know it's crazy, but it actually works. You can try it out.
That sounds safe.
There's a setting when you open a PR that's like a little checkbox that says allow maintainers to make changes to this PR, which effectively says the maintainers can push to my branch. But I thought it was just put. I didn't think it was force push, but maybe I'm wrong.
Who knew?
Time to try. Right. I will just maybe we should skip over the watch set discussion in favor of the topic from Andrea. Because I
Yes.
think it's a bit large.
Please, that would be cool. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So thank you. Well, what actually was where we are coming from? We're coming from the assumption that Crow will not support RGD versioning soon, let's say 6 months or longer. And we are looking for a solution for maybe not really having a proper versioning mechanism, but to at least limit the blast radius when we upgrade the RGDs. And in that regard, I have done a small POC to see how actually it would work if the RGD would be namespace scoped instead of cluster scoped, and with another addition that would be one change, and another change would be then once we do that, if you would have then RGDs deployed in specific namespace, and for our use case, namespace would then be, let's say, environment, like prod environment or prod 1, prod 2, prod 3, or can be a customer or something like that. And another change, but not changing Crow, but like our way of using it then would be that in RGD spec schema section, so the part which is creating CRDs, in that section we would have a different different group version kind group, different group for every namespace. I can also share my screen if it's okay. I know we have only a few minutes,
Yeah.
but
If you have a prototype, please show us. I just
yes.
enable sharing.
Okay, let me. Wait. Desktop 2. Okay, I'm sharing it. I hope you can see it. I don't know. You should see some draw diagram. Do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. So
Yes.
look. So here, I did like this. So we have one namespace, second namespace. I have resource graph definition. Of this resource graph definition is what I took from the official documentation, and I'm changing group. So you don't have group here, but what I changed was actually the group part in schema section, and I changed it in one namespace. I put a prefix which is equal to the namespace, like dev crow run. Here I put in another namespace, I put prod1 crow run. And then I'm able to have different resource graph definitions, but also they create different CRDs, totally independent scope, right? And then I'm at least able to test or to if I change the resource graph definitions in one namespace, I'm not affecting the other ones. The other ones, again, might be different customers, different namespaces, and so on. And to my surprise, it all worked very well with not much other changes. So in the code, so this is I'm running Crow on my laptop, and look, this is the only change I did in the CRD. Right, everything else works fine. and then I have, let me move this, resource graph definitions. So, sorry. So out of the box, I have everything working what I wanted. So I have the same resource graph definition working in different, being deployed in different namespaces. I have CRDs created properly. Let's grab for CRO. You see different resource CRDs. I have those applications created in different. I'm hurrying up because I know we are at the end of the time for the meeting, and I even have minus, let's say, in that one. So I have also all the components or all the resources created from the sorry, from this example, like I use this instance to create deployment and services and so on. And then I tried that, and it seems that just by changing the scope, we would at least be able to like completely decouple, let's say, namespaces, and with that, like have better control of the upgrade of the RGDs. Because if I change only one RGDs in one namespace, then it means I can test first only in that namespace, while the others I can upgrade later. How, and also I'm not really duplicating all RGDs. So now what I want to say is I'm actually offloading this responsibility from CRO to other tools until CRO implements the versioning. And what I did is actually here I just used the customize. So I have this resource graph definition which I showed you, and then I just change for specific namespace. I just changed, for example, like spec schema group, and that's all. So I'm also not duplicating anything from the resource graph definitions. So with that, that was actually our, let's say, proposal or suggestion, that knowing the current limitations that CRO is not going to support, or is currently not supporting support versioning, we might maybe you use other tools and offload it from the CRO to the other, to, like, we can call it also workaround, but let's say other solution, until we get CRO versioning implemented. And once we have CRO version implemented, then I don't think that this is like against this, against having again the resource graph definition in namespace scope. So we could still keep the resource graph definition namespace even then. So that was short. I had to rush because I know we are now 3 minutes over time, but I can provide more information about that somehow through some other channels.
I'd be curious to see if you could do an experiment of going back to like 0.4 of CRO and implement the same thing, but as meta RGD resources. So like make a resource that makes CRO resources and then inject you make an instance of your definition and then you inject the namespace into the name of the CRO resource to make more CRO resources.
Okay. I can try that. By the way, I tested this on CRO 0.3. So, but yes, I could.
just for context, so folks in here, by the way, RGDs used to be namespaced. I think the first time, the first weeks of Crow, RGD used to be namespaced, and then we moved it to cluster scoped, mainly for security reasons. And RGD like owns a CRD. So you only want to have specific group of people to have access to RGDs. Otherwise, technically, if you give RGD access to a user who's only supposed to, I don't know, like be working on the testing namespace, now they can create CRDs in the cluster, which could literally like let other people create resources in other namespaces. And now you have like this very complex, probably like you need like a special permission model around Crow if you want to make that work securely. Again, I want to hear what folks are thinking here. I'm not really like opinionated, but I know there are like some benefits into it. I like what Scott just suggested in here. Like technically you could build RGDs of RGDs. Like you can have an RGD that creates RGDs for you. And in the resources list, you can have a namespace and an RGD, and then you can unfurl those RGDs as you need, like RGDs all the way down.
And then that could also help you make role bindings to be able to link to that instance of the CRD so that only that namespace makes those kinds.
I think all of this is good. I think I want to go back to the very start of this, though. I mean, I think this was predicated on the idea that we're not going to add support for versions anytime soon. And I don't know if that's true, right? Like, I think that we haven't added versions because we weren't very clear on the use cases and like really exactly how it should work. And if we have a wonderful user who has a clear use case which we don't quite nail today, let's try to maybe start that conversation and see if we can get a design doc that adds whatever support you would like really want to see into whatever it is, and then let's sort of iterate from there. But let's also, the important thing is, I think, to capture the use cases, right? Like, what is the, I think it's self-evident. Well, it's not, I don't want to say that, but like, the problem of safety, and like, can we really be very precise about what that means and how you would like to solve it and all of that? I think that would be super helpful. And we could probably get it done we will get it done a lot sooner than we would otherwise get it done. That's for sure.
I think one of the use cases is breaking change implemented in RGD. And that's the main concern, I think, for many users. Which, by the way, I tested many of the situations, what happens with the resources if we change RGD, even breaking change. I could not find with version 0.3 any case that actually Crow corrupts any resource. It was if I implemented a breaking change in the spec schema of RGD, Crow would just try to reconcile, but it will fail because it says I'm missing some parameters, and we'll do the with the back off. We'll retry to reconcile it, but eventually we'll give up. But I could not find any situation that it actually corrupts any resource. Still, there is no guarantee that this is going to stay, or I don't know even if it's the same in 0.4 or any version later. So breaking changes are our concerns. Actually, what happens in that case? What would be with the resources that are deployed?
Oh, thanks, Jakob. I mean, I was just going to say the only thing that I would think here is whether we move back to namespace scope, which I think has some challenges as Amin outlined, or we do some design to support versioning and breaking changes, which I know we've talked about. I mean, I think originally when we had things outlined in milestone 0.4 and 0.5 and apply sets and watch sets was supposed to be in 0.4, I think 0.5 contained breaking change and versioning stuff as like one of the big rocks that we thought needed to be solved. Now that's probably changed a little bit just because things got pushed out of 0.4, but I do think it's on the roadmap such as it is. And I guess my concern was just I wouldn't want to sort of React sort of solve this problem by moving things back to namespace, and then it turns out that in the fullness of time we don't want that, we got to move back again. Like that just feels like a bad look. So it does feel like we need a plan here, and like even taking a short-term solution may not set us up for success. Like we need to just maybe do a little bit of design thinking and figure out what we're going to do first.
Yeah, fair. So this week and the next I was planning to just put up a rough sketch of what are the things that we need to solve in versioning, and then start the discussion, essentially a precursor to the design doc. Maybe we'll have something that we can share with the community that will foster some discussion. I'll start with the Google Doc. And then when it's in a decent enough shape, we'll move it to the docs folder in Crow.
Do we have a GitHub issue for this?
We do not. I think we do, but probably not in the detail that we want. Let me look up.
I think possibly what we might want to do, and sorry, Jacob, I know like you're in the queue. We might want to like start a mega thread and just everyone throw in their ideas about what versioning actually they want to solve. There's multiple ways of versioning
Exactly.
RTDs, and it's so many. There's CRD versioning, RTD versioning, storing it in OCI. So there's like so many things. We need a mega thread.
Yep.
Sorry, Jacob, go ahead. I know you've been in the
No
queue.
worries. I think for me it was also like it was two things. One, like make it community based. In my opinion, that's always super helpful, right? Like it would be cool if we can engage. Like if I, for example, can go in and engage with you on whatever you're working on, right? No matter where it is, I don't really care as long as I can engage, right? And then on the CRD topic, I just wanted to say that we had these issues with past projects. We had it with Cert Manager. We even had it in Kubernetes Native with cluster role binding and role binding. I will tell you right away, from my experience, you are always going to get it wrong no matter what you choose if you don't offer both versions. And someone will get buttered over it. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that likely it will end up in one way or another of, yeah, probably there are some benefits to both versions, both namespace and cluster scoped API for this, right? And I just want to say that there are projects out there who chose both, and it's been a pain in the ass for cluster manager, for Cert Manager at least, that is, right? So I don't know. That's all I wanted to say on this, just for keeping it in mind, right? I personally don't think it's a good idea to switch completely now that the project is out. But that's just a continuity thing for the project seriousness, right? Like to be in a state where you can say, okay, Crow doesn't change the most fundamental thing about its most central CRD right away in the fifth minor release. But I mean, that's just me. I agree there can be points made against that, right? So, yeah.
So I see two action items in here. I'm going to create a mega thread GitHub issue where we have people just dump their ideas in there and be like, let's see what you think. And Barney, I think you can like maybe own the document or a proposal on that. Since I mean this is what you propose. So I'm just gonna like create a space where we can really talk about versioning in general. And Barney, just if you want to own the thread and like the direction of where this is going, that would be great.
Yeah. Do you want to enable discussions on the GitHub project?
I think we do have it enabled already, if I'm not mistaken. And I saw at some point some discussions in there. I was like, oh my God, I've never really seen this. If anything, like I'm personally not used into it, and it just like adds another space for us to talk. So I'd rather like have a pinned GitHub issue. It's like easier to go to, and
okay. Yeah, okay, sounds reasonable. There are two issues already. We could use that or create a new one and then just refer to that.
I think I'm gonna create a new one because I think those two GitHub issues, they talk about specific problems. I'm gonna like zoom out a lot and talk very high level about versioning, and then reference those GitHub issues, close them, and then bring those ideas in there. It needs some consolidation.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Sweet. Hey, thank you so much for everyone that stayed 13 minutes after the meeting should have ended. And Andrea, Jakob, thank you so much for the topics for conversations today. So really appreciate that. With that, thank you everyone and have a wonderful day and evening.
Cheerio.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank
Bye.
you.